What's up guys, my name's Brandon, and today Apple released iOS 26.2 Beta 1 just one day after the release of the public version of iOS 26.1. Now along with this release, we also got the first beta for iPadOS 26.2, watchOS 26.2, macOS Tahoe 26.2, tvOS and HomePod version 26.2, and visionOS 26.2. But of course in this video we are talking all about iOS 26.2 Beta 1 and everything new in the update. So let's start by going into our settings and taking a look at the new build number here. So if we head into our settings, general about, the new build is 23C5027F. So we do have an F at the end of the build number, which does indicate that we will have a few betas to go as expected. Now if we go down to the modem firmware, that is 1.20.02 on the iPhone 17 series. All right, so now what's new here in iOS 26.2 Beta 1, and the first thing has to do with the lock screen. So take a look at my lock screen clock and tell me if you notice anything that looks different. So yes, take a look at my liquid glass there on that clock. It's a lot more glassy. It's like not nearly as tinted as what we had previously. So this is because we have a brand new setting on our customize page right here. If we go to customize and tap on liquid glass, take a look at this. We have an additional slider down at the bottom. So before we just had this slider up top where you can change the thickness of the font for the clock right there. But now we have an intensity slider for liquid glass. So if you put this all the way up at the top, it's more of like that frosted glass look. And the more you go down, the less it's frosted and the more kind of glassy it looks. So this looks a lot more reminiscent of the very first beta of iOS 26.0. And you can see that slider as we go throughout this, and you can kind of see the difference in the refraction in the background as well. So there's less refraction as you go up, and you can see it gets a little bit more clear as you go down. And you can do this with the different colors as well. So if I selected like a yellow color down here, you could even do this with the different colors. It doesn't just have to be the very first option right here for glass. And I cannot help but think, does this mean that we're going to eventually see a slider like this throughout iOS, not just for the lock screen clock? Like, will we actually see this inside of our settings eventually? Because as you guys remember, in iOS 26.1, if we go into our settings and then go down to display and brightness and then into liquid glass, we only get an option to do clear or tinted. There's no slider. But what if we saw that same slider in this section for liquid glass? That'd be pretty cool. Or if we tap and hold on the home screen, go to edit, and then maybe under customize, this is where we get the slider for that. So this could be somewhat hinting at that. So I'm not going to get my hopes up, but that is something new here in 26.2 Beta 1 that I think a lot of people will like. Now this next new feature is one that I've been waiting on for many years. And if we head into our reminders application and we go to create a new reminder, we can put in whatever we want. So I'll just put in like post video, for example. Doesn't matter what the reminder is. If we go down here and select date and time. So if you have a specific date and time, so maybe we'll do November 10th and we'll do this at maybe 7 p.m. So we have that set. You could always do that before, of course, but take a look at this. We have a brand new option down here, brand new toggle called urgent with a little alarm clock next to it. And that's because you can now set an alarm on the same screen where you can set a reminder. So if I turn this on, it says that it will give me an alarm on, and surprisingly, it's going to give me an alarm on my main device over here, not this specific device, which is quite interesting. But when you set that as urgent, it says alarms will activate even when a focus mode is on or your device is muted. But you have to make sure to toggle that as urgent, and then it will send you an alarm at the same time as a reminder notification. I've been wanting that for many years because I like to set alarms with my reminders to really, get me to understand and focus and realize that that reminder, that task has come up. So now you can do that from the same screen. And if you go into your settings for reminders, we do have a kill switch here for alarms. So if you don't want alarms to be turned on at all, you can turn that off right here inside of your settings. And also down here, we have urgent reminder. So it says complete from alarm. So it says instead of snooze, display a complete button to stop the alarm and immediately mark it as complete. So you have that as an additional option as well. And here's what those alarms that are set for reminders look like on your device. So we have a kind of a new interface here on the lock screen as well when you have those alarms set for reminders. Really nice. We also get some changes to podcasts. So when you open up the podcast application for the first time, we have a brand new splash screen that tells us about 3 new features in podcasts with iOS 26.2. So first off, we have auto-generated chapters. So it says easily navigate more episodes with automatically created chapters. So if a podcast host does not add chapters manually themselves, Apple Podcasts will now automatically create chapters. We also have podcast mentions. So it says see and follow mentioned podcasts right from the player and the transcript. And then also from this episode, quickly access the links shared in a podcast on the episode page. So here's an example of the automated chapters. And you can actually see this before you even go into the now playing screen. So if you go down here to the transcript and you tap on the transcript, you can see that we have these automatic headers right there. So it says tour and nature's remedy. And if we scroll down a little bit as well, you can see that we have different headers for different parts of the podcast. If you go into the now playing screen, it will break that up. So you can see before on 26.1 on the left, we don't have chapters at all, but on 26.2 beta 1 on the right, we do have those chapters that were automatically determined by Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you tap on this right here and go down, you can see the different chapters right here, and it will say automatically created underneath if they are automatically created by Apple Podcasts. And here's an example of the from this episode feature. So right beneath the hosts and guests, we have from this episode where it shows us maybe some links that were mentioned in the podcast episode. And if you want to quickly access them, you now have a standalone section for that. And then podcast mentions will be useful as well if you want to see and follow any mentioned podcasts in that episode. So maybe if the podcast host mentioned another podcast or a specific episode from a podcast, it will now show that as well in here. We have some changes in the Apple News application. So first off, take a look at the navigation bar down at the bottom. So that has been slightly tweaked. So now it shows audio and then following to the right of that. And also the search over here on the far right is more of just a magnifying glass, whereas before it was like a magnifying glass on top of something else. And when you tap on the search, you can see it's just search only, whereas before search and following were kind of combined into one section, but now they're separated where you have following right here and search is a separate section. And then also on the main screen here, we have a little slider that shows the top category. So it says discover more of Apple News, and you can explore popular topics right at the top of the app. So if I go into sports, it will show me everything in sports, the latest news from sports. If I go to business, it will show me the latest business news. So it's just a little bit easier to get to that from the main screen. If we head into our settings and go into notifications and then scroll all the way down to the bottom of notifications, we have a brand new section here called enhanced alerts. So it says enhanced safety alerts. And if you tap on that, this will show you your different safety alerts. So it shows earthquake alerts, imminent threat alerts, and also improve alert delivery. So you could share your approximate location with Apple to improve the timeliness and reliability of enhanced safety alerts. And this appears to be separate from the government alerts that you see below, like emergency alerts and some of the public safety alerts. This is its own little alerts section. So you can now be notified of earthquakes and imminent threats. We also have a change to the sleep score feature in iOS 26.2 along with watchOS 26. So one of the big features with the Apple Watch is the ability to, of course, sleep track. And with iOS 26 and watchOS 26, we now get a sleep score, but that's been tweaked a little bit here in iOS 26.2. And you can see right away that it now shows very high for that same 93 score, whereas before it showed it as excellent. So very high is now the highest level you can get, because if you go into sleep score right here and you tap on the eye, it will show you the different levels, and very high has now replaced excellent. And Apple has also changed the levels of sleep score. So now very low is 0 to 40 points, low is 41 to 60 points, okay is 61 to 80, high is 81 to 95, and very high is 96 to 100. So I'm not too sure why mine shows very high for 93 when it's supposed to be 95 and above. Maybe that's a bug, but those are the new kind of classifications. Those are the new levels for sleep score with watchOS 26.2 and iOS 26.2. When you go into the sleep focus mode, the icon now turns purple instead of green. So that's what it looked like on 26.1 on the left, iOS 26.2 beta 1 on the right, and it also applies to the top of your screen when you go into sleep focus from another device. You can see it's purple up there instead of green. Also, the live translation feature is coming to the EU with iOS 26.2 because Apple said that this is coming in December, and we're most likely going to see the final release of iOS 26.2 in December. So presumably we will have AirPods live translation support in the EU with this first beta. Now, as far as the performance goes for iOS 26.2 beta 1, I'm not noticing a major change from iOS 26.1, the final official release, which I guess is a pretty good thing for a first beta. So I would not expect the performance to be as good as iOS 26.1, the stable build, but this is what we're working with for the Geekbench score. So we got a 3856 and a 9767. You could see how that compares to the previous build, the 26.1 official release. So very close in the scores here, and also just using the device, for the past hour or so, or 2 hours, it feels, pretty much the same as 26.1 stable, which again, I guess that's a pretty good sign. Now, as far as battery life goes, I would not expect battery life to be as good as the 26.1 stable build because we do have, of course, the feedback application and all the logging going on in the background. Just typically that's going to lead to worse battery life than a final official release, but I'm not noticing any type of major drain here so far. So I'm at 77%. You guys will have to let me know what I started this video with, but I don't think it's going to be too bad here with 26.2 beta 1, at least not for me on my 17 Pro Max. All right, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So next up is most likely going to be iOS 26.2 beta 2, and I would expect Apple to be on a 2-week release schedule, at least for the start. So I would not expect to see a release next week on the week of the 10th. We're most likely going to see the next beta for iOS 26.2 on the week of November 17th. And since the 0.2 updates are pretty big updates, usually, like I always say, the 0.2 and the 0.4 updates are typically the two biggest updates aside from the 0.0 update. So I would expect to see even more new features and changes added throughout the later betas of iOS 26.2. But again, we will most likely have a week gap before that. And then after that, we could be switching over to a weekly release schedule, and we should be seeing the final official release of iOS 26.2 at some point in December. So most likely it will not be on the week of Christmas. It's possible, but I would expect maybe the week of the 15th, possibly even the 22nd, even though that is the week of Christmas. So we'll have to wait and see, but we are expecting that in December. And in the meantime, we might get a 26.1.1 at some point in between then. But anyways, guys, that is iOS 26.2 beta 1. Let me know your thoughts, especially with this liquid glass slider for the lock screen. Do you hope we see that system-wide? Let me know your thoughts overall on 26.2 beta 1, and also let me know how it's running on your device. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future iOS update videos just like this one. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.